This week on Quality Digest Live, why good IT projects go bad.
Plus, we look at how poor communications almost cost one team the World Series. Who was that?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. Anyway, that and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for November 4th, 2011. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, let's start this week with a pair of news items that recently caught our eye. First, what if a hacker could use a smartphone to track what you were typing on your keyboard just inches away?
Scary.
Well, if you are the research team at Georgia Tech with a lot of time on your hands, you've discovered exactly how to do that using the smartphone accelerometer. The accelerometer is the little device in the phone that detects when it's tilted or shook or anything like that. Well, the technique works through probability and by detecting the vibrations of pairs of keystrokes. They then compare these pairs to their own specially constructed dictionary to come up with the word. So the system is about 80% accurate, they say. So basically, if somebody could somehow sneak a application into your smartphone that you would set, it has to be within about 3 inches of the keyboard, they could detect what you're typing. And they say the solution, though they don't know that this has ever happened, is just don't set your smartphone down within 3 inches of your keyboard.
Yep, that would be a wise precaution, definitely.
Smart guys, those guys at Georgia.
Absolutely. Also in the news this week, the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania recently hosted a Women in Business conference. The participants were asked for their definition of the term innovation. Now, according to Brooke L. Epley, Director of Strategy for Sony Music Entertainment, innovation involves good ideas that haven't been brought together. The dots haven't been connected. Deborah Nelson, Chief of Staff for Global Sales at Hewlett-Packard, had this to say: "We think about innovation as translating ideas into a meaningful impact for our customers." Finally, there's this quote from Caroline Strzelka, Business Development Director for Sesame Workshop. "We define innovation as taking risks to make people's lives better."
I like that one. Yep, that's a good one.
So, how do you define innovation? How do you practice it in your organization? Write us at qdl@qualitydigest.com and let us know.
Okay, now let's turn to our first feature article of this week. Lots of people attempt to improve their technology, their information technology systems. Unfortunately, more often than not, those projects don't turn out so well. And this was an article in by Trip Babbitt. That would be Trip Babbitt. The Information Technology Conundrum, New Methods and Thinkings for Failing IT Projects. What Trip is talking about in this story is IT projects that run amok. Very often they're called black swans. These are like IT projects that just grow and grow and grow and suck in more and more and more money. Time and basically don't go anywhere. And very often get canceled, sometimes after millions of dollars have been spent. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but one of the main reasons he points to is scope creep. And this is where you've designed an IT project without really understanding the goals of the organization. And for one, he talks about very often, we talk about this in terms of call centers. A lot of technology goes into call centers, and one of them is the interactive voice recognition systems, where you call in and it asks you for your account number, and then it asks you, press 1 to do this, press 2 to do that, and it sends you to another tree, which sends you to another tree, which sends you to another tree, which sends you to another tree. And eventually, you pull out your hair and the customer hangs up. They're frustrated, they're angry, or maybe they get connected to the right person. I don't know if you had this happen. "Oh, I'm sorry, you've reached the wrong department. Let me connect you to where you need to go." And where do they put you?
Back in the tree.
Back in the tree.
Frustrating.
And he says in the long run, not only does it not save the customer any money or time, it probably is losing business and costing the company money. And he says the whole idea to begin with is that these IT solutions are supposed to save the company money and make the experience better for the customer, and they end up doing neither.
Right.
So,
it's a problem. I mean, and these things, as you say, they're sinkholes of cash. Right. He used the example of a UK organization that spent, I think he said $700 million.
Yeah, this was actually a, let me see if I can find it real quickly. This was a healthcare organization, if I remember right.
Spent 700 million pounds. That's $1 billion, more than $1 billion. And the project never went anywhere. Eventually they gave up on it and they just abandoned it. And that's what Tripp is talking about here, is the fact that you start these projects with the best of intentions, scope creep creeps in, the project expands, and eventually maybe management changes, people get tired of it, they move on, and it never gets completed, and you've wasted all this time and money.
Yeah, see, just to say what that was, John Seddon, founder of Vanguard Consulting, predicted
National Health Service, right?
National Health Service, a $12 billion IT project would be a failure, and it was scrapped in 2010. The project was already 700 million pounds.
Over budget.
That's about what?
Over $1 billion.
It's a 1.3 billion or something like that. So yeah. So we talked about one of the problems here was scope creep. And he says part of one of the solutions they try to give is, they recognize they have a problem, so they say, okay, let's fix it. And how do they want to fix it? Well, they say, well, we've got to have better planning and management of scope, or we've got to have better governance, or better contract management. Well, what are those things focused on? They're focused on the project. It's like the project's broke, so let's go back and address the project without saying, wait a minute, maybe the project's broke because it was poorly designed to begin with.
Right. People make it a project to look at the project.
They make it a project to look at the project when the whole problem is the project itself. And he says the real solution is that the focus can't be on the project, or on IT. First of all, your focus, big surprise, has got to be on your customer and on your systems. If you don't understand what your customer wants, and if you don't understand how your system already works, before you bring in the IT people, you're going to go nowhere.
Right.
Because they're going to design a project based on criteria that maybe have no relationship to reality.
Right, exactly.
And they're going to do things that just do not make sense from either the customer's point of view or the company's point of view. So the first stage is to get knowledge, understand your organization as a system, understand everything that goes into it. And then stage 2, improve your system before you bring in the ID department. He says you are just kidding yourself if you believe you can improve by ignoring the design and management of the work.
Right.
Got to do that first.
Right. You got to keep the customers in mind. Again, many times that we lose the forest for the trees here, kind of a thing, where we get into it for a reason, and the customer goals, the voice of the customer, many times drives this kind of thing. You get into it a little way, and that totally gets in the rear view. You forget about what the customer needs really are, and takes on a life of its own. And pretty soon, again, you're 700 million pounds over budget, and you're going to cancel these projects. And that's really what he's talking about here, is this idea that many times you get into these things and then you just move on, you abandon them. They die, they just wither away, and then there's another one that crops up, and all of a sudden you spent these millions and millions or billions of dollars and you've gotten nowhere. No one's gotten anything out of it.
Right.
So it's a problem. But
so when you got software, sometimes it's like that little deal, when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. Sometimes that's the way it is with IT. We've got this software product, and so therefore everything can be solved with it. Not necessarily true.
Right.
Okay. Well, hey, bada. Swing.
Well, we next want to talk about a very interesting piece that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily by our good friend and columnist Mark Graban.
Right.
And the title of the article, of the column, was World Series Defect, Wrong Pitcher. Well, we're going to start this one off with Tony La Russa. Now, Tony La Russa, in case you're not a baseball fan like I am a baseball fan. If you're not, Tony La Russa is the manager, or now the ex-manager, he recently retired, of the St. Louis Cardinals. And Tony La Russa's Cardinals were facing the Texas Rangers in the World Series at the end of last month. Well, in Game 5, which was at Texas's stadium, very loud, very large stadium, Tony La Russa wanted to make a pitching change. They were getting towards the end of the game, and it was a very key juncture. The game was tied at that point, and Tony La Russa called the bullpen. What a manager does is he sits in the dugout, he calls the bullpen, which is oftentimes hundreds of feet away, and you can't really see it.
Yeah, why?
Calls the bullpen, and he says, I want to get up these two guys, Mark Zapinski, and before he could say Jason Mott, who was the guy he really wanted to bring in, apparently, the bullpen coach, Derek Lilliquist, hung up the phone or somehow didn't quite get the message. So the wrong pitcher the right pitcher was warming up, but the guy that La Russa really wanted wasn't warming up and wasn't available a couple of batters later when one of the Rangers' really top right-handed hitters came up. And just as an aside, you want a right-handed pitcher to face a right-handed hitter and a left-handed pitcher to face a left-handed hitter, and not a right-handed pitcher to face a left-handed hitter or a left-handed pitcher to face a right-handed pitcher.
And Zapinski was left-handed?
Zapinski is a lefty.
And the
Mike
pitcher
Napoli, who was the hitter, was a righty.
Is a righty, okay.
So what happened was La Russa had to bring in Zapinski, which was
because
wrong
Mott
guy.
wasn't warmed up.
Wasn't available.
Right.
So as a consequence, Napoli got a hit, big turning point in the game, and as a consequence, the Cardinals lost. They lost the game because of this. It's what the old, for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost kind of thing. Crazy circumstance. Should never happen. But it did happen, and it happened for a couple of reasons. And a couple things, and the reason why we wanted to cover it and the applicability of it for our industry is what this means in terms of management. First thing was the system was flawed. As you said, it's like, why is the dugouts here, the managers in the dugout, the bullpen's all the way the heck down there.
And if I remember right, they say in this particular stadium, there isn't even line of sight between the two. You have to call it in.
You have to call it. You can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
Very loud stadium, so you could assume that there would be maybe a bungled communication there because in a very loud stadium, and it was. So that wasn't error-proof. For instance, Mark Graben brings up the point of physicians, and Mark works in the healthcare industry primarily. He brings up the point of CPOE. And that's computerized physician order entry, where physicians will enter prescriptions in a computer, so there's no mistaking. 100 milligrams of heparin versus 10. There's no mistaking that. The doctor's typing it in, and you can see it.
And the computer can actually check, also make certain quality checks.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a protection for this to not happen. That doesn't exist in baseball, and why? Because baseball is a very hidebound traditional sport, and we just call it in. That's the way we've done it for decades and years, and we don't need to improve it. Well, obviously in this case, you did need to improve it. So that's one big thing, one big lesson you can learn from this. The other is the emperor has no clothes situation.
This is La Russa.
This goes back to La Russa. Now, Tony La Russa, again, if you're a baseball fan, Tony La Russa is generally considered a genius within the context of baseball. Most fans would say he's the best manager in baseball. And his reputation now has been established over 20 or 30 years as a manager of, I don't think anybody questions him. So for instance, Derek Lilliquist, the bullpen coach, heard Zapinski. He got Zapinski up. Now, Zapinski, Jason Mott certainly, Derek Lilliquist, any fan watching on TV would say,
what the hell's going on?
You really want Jason Mott to be pitching in this circumstance. Why would you have the second tier pitcher in there? It makes no sense. And you think about it, I mean, the guys down in the bullpen are all paid a lot of money. They're at the absolute apex of their profession. They're certainly a lot smarter than me as a fan sitting at home.
And they're sitting there going, what?
That doesn't make sense. But did anybody then call back to the dugout and say, are you sure you want Zapinski and not Mott?
Didn't question the boss.
Nobody questioned the boss. Yeah. And now La Russa took the blame for it, said, it was my fault. And it was. I think partially because he created a culture.
I was going to say, on more than one level,
where he's not to be questioned, I think. Yeah. And that's a really damaging thing in any organization. I don't care if it's Tony La Russa, I don't care if it's Jack Welch, I don't care who it is at the top. That person needs to be questioned. If you are an SME, if you're hired to do a job and you're an expert in your space, and you think that what you've been told to do doesn't make sense, you got to push it upstairs. You got to say, hey, I don't think this makes sense. Do you really want to do this? So ask those questions. That kind of fell apart here too. And then that was, I think, another problem with this whole scenario. Tony La Russa actually ended up retiring. Actually, he retired a couple days after the World Series. And he's 66, so I think it was the time. But I wonder if this was a contributing factor for that as well. He said, hey, maybe I'm losing my fastball a little bit. Maybe I need to move on if I can't keep control of this. So it's interesting. Again, I think this was a great example of why you need to look at your systems and think about them.
I wonder if there's going to be changes in the future. I mean, if it really is like kind of this communication problem, why do you have a phone call? Why not actually a screen that's, and you type in, put, warm up, Mott and Zapinski, and it stays up there. Just like when you make an order at Starbucks, it goes up there on the screen and it stays there. And it's like, who are we putting up? Oh, we got Mott and Zapinski.
There you go.
And it stays there. You don't have to worry. Oh, did I hear it? Whatever.
It should be simple, but it's a great lesson on a small scale. It's a great lesson for what we're all doing out there and things we should be aware of.
That's right. Quality management
by baseball.
By baseball.
Right on.
That's right. Okay. Let's go to our tech corner today. We happen to have a cool little force torque gauge. If we can go over here to our gauge cam. Actually, while we're doing that, let me bring up some software as well. Okay, if we go to our gauge cam here, You see what I've got here is a Mark 10 force torque indicator. And what I'm going to do is run through a couple of basic operations with this, what you can do with the indicator itself, and then we'll do a little experiment which will show some of the capabilities. So this is your basic, kind of your basic indicator here. Right now I have a force gauge attached to it, and you'll see there's a threaded insert on either side, so you could attach whatever type of gripper you wanted. I'm not going to use a gripper, I'm just going to use my hand to squeeze it. So if we look at our display here, you can see as I squeeze this, we get a reading. Now, you can tell that I'm doing a compression reading right now because these little arrows up here are pointing toward each other. If I was to pull apart on the sensor, you see the arrows now point away, indicating that I'm measuring tension. There are several modes in this instrument. One is real time, which is what you're looking at right now. It also has a peak compression indicating, peak tension indicating, and back to real time. And we'll do peak compression. We will zero out the display, and as it says, it just stops when it reaches the peak reading. So no matter, even if I release the sensor, it just stops at the peak reading. So let's zero this back out, and let's go back to real time mode. Now I will say that regardless of what your display is here, in the upper right, and this is kind of a cool feature, you always have your peak reading in the upper right corner. The upper reading is compression, the lower reading is peak. So even if you're in real-time display here, you will always get your peak reading in the upper right corner. Zero this out. We can also set this up as a go, no-go gauge. You will see in the upper left corner, I have set this for an upper limit of 7 pounds, a lower limit of 3 pounds, and let's see what happens. As I start to squeeze, you'll see the arrow is low, meaning I'm underneath my lower limit. As soon as I get within my pass range, it turns to a square, and if I continue squeezing and go over my upper range, I get an upper arrow indicating that I'm too high. So I can just back it down, I'm in the pass range, and now I'm down low. One last thing I want to show you is you also can store data on this. If we scoot this down here, I have a data key. Every time I press this data key, it takes a reading and stores it in the device. If I want to look at that, I can hit Menu, and we can go back, we can view the data. Here's all the data that I took, and of course this data can be downloaded to a computer for further analysis. All right, so now let's go on with our little test experiment here. I'm going to remove, this is a hot swap by the way, I'm going to hot swap my force gauge with a torque gauge. And actually, let me show you one thing with these connectors. If you look at this connector, this is actually a smart connector. Stored in this smart connector are all the calibration information for the sensor itself, as well as the indicator setup. Now what's interesting about this is once I program the indicator for a particular type of measurement, all those settings are stored in here. So when I plug this into the indicator's ready to go. So in other words, you could actually lock out the keyboard on this. All the operator has to do is plug in the sensor and start testing. It's actually ready to go. There's no setup required. Okay, so what we're going to do now is a torque measurement, and I've got a little experiment I'm going to do here. What I've got here is a screw and something for the screw to go in. See that? Okay, so what I'm going to do is set up a little test over here. So I'm going to go to my screen here, my test screen. We're going to do a little setup. I'm going to do an automatic continuous reading data acquisition. The data acquisition will start when the threshold of my reading exceeds 0.5 pound-inches, and it will stop when the reading is 90% of whatever the maximum reading is, or the break. And we'll see why we're doing that in just one second. So I'm going to go to, first thing I want to do is tighten this screw. So if we can go to the gauge cam here, what I'm going to do is tighten this screw until I get a little over 2, there we go, a little over 2 pound-inches of torque. Now let's go back to our screen. Go back to our screen, we're going to start our data acquisition. Sorry about that. We're going to start our data acquisition, and now I'm going to start loosening this, and there it goes. So I loosened it, you see it ramped up to about 1.45 pound inches, and then the screw broke loose. So let's stop this and let's do it again. So back to our let's just double check our reading. So let's go back to our indicator. I'm going to tighten this again to just over 2 pound-inch. Let's go back to our screen, click start. Notice it hasn't started taking data yet until I start to actually unscrew this. Now I unscrew it, unscrew it, unscrew it, and boom, breaks free. And you can see it broke free at about 1.65. So about the same range. Actually, I had tightened that a little bit more than I had earlier. Now, once you have this data, you can go into analysis. You'll see all my readings are here. All the readings that were taken. Looks like there were 58 readings before it broke free. There's a certain amount of data analysis you can do there. All sorts of functions that we won't go into here, but quite a bit you can do in terms of triggering and just capturing the data exactly the way you want. Once I'm done, I can do analysis on here, or I can export it to Excel for further analysis. And of course, once I export it to Excel, of course, I could export it into any other device, software like some sort of SBC software for more intense analysis than you can probably do within the measure gauge software here. So it's a pretty interesting little tool. The thing I really like about it, really, which I think makes it really interesting, is that all the measurement data, setup, and the calibration data are stored in the gauge. In terms of what that allows you to do on the shop floor is really great, because it really error-proofs the measurement. Like I said, you could lock out the device, so all the operator really has to do is just plug in a pre-programmed sensor, start testing, all their limits there, all the testing parameters are there. It just makes a lot more error proofing. So pretty neat little device.
Good to go. Great, great. Yep. Well, thanks, Dirk. Thanks, Mark 10.
Sure.
For providing that to us for this episode of Tech Corner.
Exactly. And remember, that was the Mark 10 model M5i.
M5i. And thank you. Thank you, Dirk. Sure. And thank you, Mark 10. And if you out there have interesting tools or products or solutions that you'd like us to walk through here on Tech Corner, we encourage you to send those to us here at QDL@qualitydigest.com, and we will get them on the air.
That's right.
Show them off on Tech Corner. Dirk loves doing these Tech Corners.
Yeah, I'm just a geek.
He's the guy.
No life. But I enjoy the playing with stuff.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was great. Thank you. Okay, so next week we want to point out something that we're doing, which is very, very unique, Dirk. And this is something that we're doing that's going to be fun. Yeah. We have a show that we're doing called Quality and Social Media. It's actually a live video webcast that we're delivering to ASQ's Minnesota section. They're meeting, and it's on Tuesday, November 8th, and it's 7 o'clock Eastern Time.
That's right. We're extinguished
speakers, experts, and we're going to be talking about social media and quality. It should be a very interesting event. You can tune in as well if you'd like. We're going to be streaming that using one of our systems, and you'll be able to check that out. Keep an eye out for an email coming to you soon with all the details about how you can view that. Again, it's going to be next Tuesday, September 8th, and it's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. local in Minneapolis, and 4 a.m. here on the West Coast.
That's right.
4 p.m.
4 p.m.
4 p.m. here on the West Coast. So look out for that.
Yeah, so tune into that. Again, like Mike said, it'll be live. Might be a little late in the day. Hopefully, well, actually, I'm not sure there'll be a recorded version of that or not. So maybe or maybe not. So
we'll catch it live.
Yeah, catch it live.
Great.
Be more fun that way anyway.
Well, that's our show. That's our show for this week. Thanks for joining us, Dirk. Thank you for joining us.
Yep.
As always, another great week of content. Look out for it next week in QDD and another episode of QDL next Friday.
That's right.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.